event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has awarded the Yathir Medal to the Order of the National Merit to War veteran Saleh Goujil at the Palais du Peuple here in Algiers. The Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defence, Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, Army General Said Greha, has chaired the national seminar entitled The African Sahel Security and Development Challenges in Light of Geopolitical Rivalries in the region. The Deputy Chairperson of the African Union, Salma Malika Haddadi, has called on Member States to adopt this year's AU theme of Justice for Africans and People of African Descent. As the Palestinian Prime Minister affirmed that the Israeli occupying authorities were deliberately exploiting the situation of famine they created in the Gaza Strip, scores of people were killed in the sustained Israeli airstrikes on the territory. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Mariam Bershi. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, himself laureate of the Sadr Medal of the Order of National Merit, has awarded the Yathir Medal of the Order of National Merit to war veteran Saleh Goujil at the Palais du Peuple here in Algiers. Ashabakar reports.
The honorary distinction was awarded to war veteran Saleh Goujil at the end of his term as Speaker of the Council of the Nation, a prestigious constitutional institution which he served with competence, integrity and brilliance. Speaking on the occasion, Mr. Saleh Goujil expressed his pride and paid tribute to the sacrifices of the martyrs for Algeria's independence.
Today is a historic day, especially as the distinction and event are held in the presence of all these war veterans, men and women, and all officials of the nation. I'm so proud, but at the same time I'm thinking about the martyrs, the companions who martyred and didn't enjoy independence. They should stay in our memory. Their advice was take care of Algeria. This distinction has been made possible thanks to the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, who since taking office as President, he revived history while implementing his program, because the beginning should start from history and memory. Through memory, we build the present and plan the future. Long live Algeria and glory to our martyrs.
Through this distinction, the President of the Republic honors the entire November generation, those who gave their lives for the homeland and those who witnessed independence and the building of the nation state. It is also meant as a tribute and recognition of his mission during two challenges: the fight for the country's liberation and the struggle for its edification. Mr. Goujil also received the certification of the presidential decree signed by the President of the Republic. At the end of the ceremony, the President of the Republic met with a group of war veterans, women and men, including Ms. Drifa Ben Mhidi, sister of the martyr Larbi Ben Mhidi, as well as war veteran Jamila Boupasha.
The Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defence, Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, Army General Said Greha, has supervised at the National Army Cycle, the national seminar entitled The African Sahel Security and Development Challenges in Light of Geopolitical Rivalries in the region. The details in this report by Ashabakar.
In his speech, the Army General Said Greha reaffirmed Algeria's commitment to its foreign policy principles, emphasizing peaceful solutions, dialogue and respect for sovereignty in an effort to restore stability in the Sahel.
Algeria committed to the principles of its steadfast foreign policy, such as mutual respect, good neighborliness, non-interference in the internal affairs of states, and respect for their national sovereignty and territorial integrity, has made and continues to make significant efforts through its diplomatic initiatives to restore political and security stability in the Sahel region by favoring peaceful solutions to crises, rejecting the logic of arms, and promoting dialogue and negotiation.
The Army General reaffirmed that Algeria remains a pillar of regional stability by supporting Sahel countries through military cooperation, training and counter-terrorism efforts via the Joint Operational Staff Committee while respecting each state's sovereignty.
Algeria has been and remains a source of security and stability in the region through its commitment to strengthening the defense capabilities of its partners and neighbors in the Sahel within the framework of bilateral military cooperation programs and training the armed forces of countries in the region, as well as its support in the fight against terrorism through the Joint Operational Staff Committee, CIMOC, in line with the principles of each country's responsibility of its own security challenges and full respect for the state's sovereignty.
The Army General highlighted Algeria's deep historical and humanitarian ties with the Sahel peoples, reflected in its support for economic and social development through humanitarian aid and regional projects. He also stressed Algeria's commitment to peace and stability in the region, guided by the strategic vision of President Tebboune despite attempts to undermine its role.
Still with this national seminar, the Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Hattaf, chaired the first conference held under the theme Achieving Security, Stability and Development in the African Sahel Region. What is the effective strategy? The Algerian diplomacy chief stressed Algeria's firm determination and unwavering will to overcome difficulties and triumph over security challenges in the region.
Algeria has unlimited patience and all the necessary to face up to the complicated situation prevailing in the Sahel-Saharan region with wisdom and serenity. Algeria also believes in unity, the unity of historical heritage and the unity of aspirations, which motivates it to always extend the hand of solidarity and brotherliness to all its neighboring brothers. Algeria also has the firmness, determination and will that allow it to overcome difficulties and adversity in favor of its objectives and interests in order to serve the security, stability and prosperity of its Sahel-Saharan environment.
That was the statement made by the Algerian diplomacy chief Ahmed Hattaf. The Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Selma Malika Haldari, has called on Member States to adopt this year's AU theme of justice for Africans and people of African descent. Mrs. Haldari stressed that the Agenda 2060 constitutes the best vision for the Africa we want to promote. The Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Azouz Nasri, for his part, said that the Council would continue its efforts through the Pan-African Parliament, PAP, and the African Parliamentary Union, APU, to fulfill the aspirations of Africans and complete the sovereignty of the continent through the independence of the last colony, Western Sahara. Mr. Nasri stressed that the victorious Algeria reiterates its pride in belonging to the continent and its commitment to African solutions and integration for the leadership of a continent that has overcome colonialism and racism. On the occasion, our colleague Samir Al-Fikri contacted a South African academic researcher and political analyst, Dr. Ibrahim Deen, to discuss the challenges facing the African continent. Asked on the best way for Africa to grow economically and to form unity, he had the following.
Forming a unified stance is going to be difficult because all the different countries have different histories, different languages, different pasts, different cultures, different populations. But, in saying so, there needs to be a commonality, and this commonality can be, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Because Africa has, by 2030, will have 42% of the world's population. All African youth are seen as much more technologically advanced than that of Europe. We have our greatest strength. Africa as a continent is yet to grow. And we're currently in, the arena and the area for growth. And for that to happen, we need to then form these common stances, such as, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Because, one country, we may not have much populations, we don't have economies of scale. But as a continent, we have an economy, a population of over 300 million, a GDP of over 2 trillion. So we can do things provided we act in unison and adopt economic stances that will benefit the continent. Obviously, there will be losers, but we also then need to have safety nets to ensure that the losers aren't seen as losers and that there is no free riding, that's needed, that happens.
Mr. Ibrahim Deen highlighted the Algerian-South African convergence on many just causes in Africa.
The situation of all these other countries, and there's lots of common issues of commonality that we can, that we can collaborate on, and that we are collaborating on. One, the issue of Western Sahara, the referendum in Western Sahara that needs to be implemented. The issue of Israel's growing role in the continent, that South Africa and Algeria are on the same page. Similarly, in terms of economic issues, South Africa and Algeria are on very similar kilters, and also the move away from fossil fuels towards gas, towards green energy. South Africa and Algeria, Algeria, which has large gas reserves, do and can play a big role. So there is a lot of areas for cooperation. There does need to be the political will, and the political will be difficult, especially in contested countries. South Africa is currently a government of national unity, and that may actually impede proper policy changes.
That was South African academic researcher and political analyst Dr. Ibrahim Deen. Moving to the situation in the Middle East, as the Palestinian Prime Minister affirmed that the Israeli occupying authorities were deliberately exploiting the situation of famine they created in the Gaza Strip, scores of people were killed in the sustained Israeli airstrikes on the territory. The news agency Wafa said that 36 Palestinians, including women and children, were killed and several others wounded in the pounding of a school sheltering displaced in the district of Gaza. Another attack targeting the northern area of Jabalia killed at least 19 Palestinians, raising to over 50 the number of people killed today. This came as Palestinian Premier Mohammed Mustafa stressed that the Israeli authorities have caused a situation of famine in Gaza with the aim of sanctioning the Palestinians in an attempt to crush their resistance. In a statement made outside the extended ministerial meeting organized by the so-called Group of Madrid in the Spanish capital, he urged the international community to act urgently, saying that the deliberate deprivation of food, the continued bombardments and the destruction of all aspects of life clearly constituted war crime. US President Donald Trump has said that President Vladimir Putin, as he put it, gone absolutely crazy by unleashing the largest aerial attack on the war on Ukraine. President Trump said he was considering new sanctions against Moscow, although he also scolded Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Kremlin asked about Trump's specific remarks about Putin being so-called crazy, thanks to the US people and Trump in person for their assistance in launching peace negotiations, but suggested Trump and others might be emotionally overloaded. President Trump also criticized Zelensky, saying that the Ukrainian leader is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Air Force said Russia had launched 355 drones and 9 cruise missiles against Ukraine overnight. The Kremlin responded that the attacks on Ukraine were directed at military targets and that the strikes were a response to significant Ukrainian attacks on Russian civilian targets. In Venezuela, the ruling Unified Socialist Party has won an overwhelming victory in the legislative and regional elections, gaining 23 out of the 24 governorates at stake. According to the National Electoral Council, President Maduro's party captured all states except the central western state of Cojedes in yesterday's elections that were boycotted by the opposition. The coalition led by President Maduro's party also captured 82.68% of the seats at stake in parliament. We asked the chargé d'affaires of Venezuela's embassy here in Algiers, Gabriel Torrealba, about the outcome of the voting, which he held as a clear message of the Venezuelans' aspiration to live in peace.
We are excited with the high votes given to the political parties that support the Bolivarian revolution. The 80% of the vote is a clear message that there is a country that wants to live in peace and progress by using its votes.
President Nicolas Maduro announced having postponed until January the examining of the constitutional reform he had put forth with the aim, as he put it, to improve the electoral system. He told the press after casting his vote that he and the Constitutional Reform Commission's members agreed to prepare for a process of consultations and a more open, inclusive dialogue before the draft reform he examined or is examined by the new National Assembly early next year. President Maduro, who was elected last January for a third mandate, underscored that he seeks to enhance the electoral system in general. Back to the country, the Sonatrach Group has won a global award at the 29th World Gas Conference held in Beijing, China. The public group won the Industry Award for the World Gas Conference Best Practices across the full value chain following a presentation given by Nadia Haddoum, Project Manager in the Executive Directorate for Business Development and Marketing on innovative solutions for managing drilling instability in carbonaceous reservoir wells. Ms. Hocharfi has more details in this report.
The Sonatrach representative's presentation was selected from hundreds of submissions by several companies from different countries, following a rigorous evaluation by International Review Committee. Ms. Haddoum received the award certificate and medal during the conference's closing ceremony on May 23rd. She had already been honored once during the presentation of her work during a debate session. On the occasion, Sonatrach considered this distinction in such a strategic event as an international recognition of the high level of its management and the high skills of its employees. The group said it was proud to have among its members such profiles who contribute to enhancing its international reputation and offering innovative solutions to improve its performance.
That's it for Studio's News Bulletin. I invite you now to listen to our weekly program, The Event of the Week. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
The International Event of the Week.
This week, the United Kingdom, France and Canada threatened to take concrete actions if the Israeli army pursued, as they put it, an egregious expansion of its military operations in Gaza. In a joint statement, they called on the Israeli government to stop its operations and to immediately allow in humanitarian aid into Gaza, responding to the Israeli government's plan to take full control of the Palestinian territory. The three countries considered the move as wholly inadequate, as the denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching humanitarian law, while pointing out that the level of suffering in Gaza was intolerable. The leaders of the UK, France and Canada reiterated their country's support for a ceasefire as well as for the implementation of a two-state solution, allowing for the setting up of an independent Palestinian state. Among the concrete actions that we Western states are considering to take are a review of their political and economic relationship with Israel, notably of the association agreement signed with the EU, and the suspension of the trade agreement signed between the UK and Israel. Asked if the European Union's decision to review the 25-year-old agreement signaled a shift in its relations with Israel, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had this to say.
On the surface, the EU position appears to signal a shift in its relationship with Israel. But when we look at it deeper, there is less optimism. While an EU review of its relationship with Israel has the potential to significantly impact the Jewish state relations with the EU, the question remains whether the EU has the political will to significantly make such a shift. Based on its past record, that appears to be a remote possibility. It took the EU 15 months to take this stand, this latest position, from when Ireland and Spain requested for this kind of a review, asking at the time for appropriate actions to take, for the Europeans to take against the Jewish state. It will be hard to imagine that the EU will take today impactful decisions against Israel. And even if the EU were to take these actions, it has little leverage by way of affecting or getting some impact on Israel's behavior and forcing it to redress its genocidal policies. Europe, as we know, has followed the United States position on when it comes to Israel in this context. And with the U.S. giving a carte blanche to Israel, it is highly unlikely that the EU will take actions that will result in real impact without the U.S. consent. And that, at this juncture, appears to be a remote possibility.
The threats of concrete actions, notably by the United Kingdom and France, raise significant questions about the future of international diplomacy and the enforcement of international law. They did not rule out the idea of resorting to sanctions and other measures, stating that any such actions would be discussed at the EU and United Nations level. Such an approach that was strongly criticized by the Israeli Prime Minister underscores the challenges of achieving a consensus among the main powers. Asked on whether the Israeli Prime Minister's criticism could be considered cynical and indefensible, as he tends to incriminate those who remind him of the international norms that apply to all states, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had the following.
On many ways, this is a deja vu. The U.S. President, former U.S. President Joe Biden issued an executive order targeting specific settlers, but that did not deter the settlers because his actions or his executive orders were not followed up by punitive actions. Worse, when the current President Donald Trump took power, he reversed this order, and this amidst of continued violence. The UK is following the same approach as former President Biden did, issuing sanctions against two so-called outposts. These are settlements built without Israeli government license and are called outposts until Israel retroactively recognizes them, at which point Israel treats them as any other settlement. But without a follow-up with punitive actions, this too is doomed to failure. The UK and France have remained cautious, in part or mostly because for fear of alienating influential domestic constituencies that are pro-Israel, including pro-Israeli lobbying groups and Jewish communities. And that is really one of the main factors that one consider. Without a doubt, this position for UK and France is significant. The UK and France refusal to rule out sanctions against Israel marks a tentative and potentially significant shift with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It reflects a growing concern over the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, the humanitarian disaster that we see unfolding before us. However, if this position is not translated into coordinated and principled actions, it will see the same fate as others have seen and become merely a rhetorical position, and it will have the same fate that we have seen before.
Another statement signed by 27 donor countries, including the UK, condemns Israel's plan to replace the current aid delivery and distribution system. It aims to replace the existing humanitarian agencies, including the UN, with the involvement of civilian contractors. It was rejected by the UN and donor countries as partly conceived and politically motivated and as inefficient, unlikely to replace the humanitarian agencies' proven action. Asked on whether the donor country's statement underscores the awakening of the international community regarding the Israeli government, which seems to be losing its ally support, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
This statement speaks volume to the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza But this statement comes late, short on substance, and fails to hold Israel responsible for its genocide actions. Calls like this remind us or remind the world of the atrocities the Jewish state is committing in Gaza and the West Bank against the Palestinian people. They are registered event as historical data for generations to come, a historical reminder of not only of the horrific Israeli actions, but more than anything else, of the horrific silence and a lack of actions to hold Israel responsible. When placed in its proper context, this statement is carefully crafted. It is politically motivated, and it intends to exonerate Israeli actions in the West Bank and Gaza. It echoes the sentiment of the entire world, a sentiment that Palestinians heard time and time again. The statement from this perspective is for public consumption. It is designed to attract the news, make headlines, and project an image that these countries are bothered by Israeli actions. But take the substance. It rightly condemns Israel, calling its plans politically motivated, but stopped short of taking real actions or explain what is politically motivated. Here lies the danger. As is, the call implies that the donors are now in agreement with its recent policies to bend the United Nations agency, whose international mission is specifically to deliver humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians in Gaza, and for that matter in the West Bank as well. UNRWA is the organization that the United Nations created to address this issue. And by remaining silent when Israel barred this association on this issue, the call is condoning Israel's policy and in turn endorsing its violations, or by guilt, by association, endorsing its violation of international law. This is providing assistance through UNRWA is a right that the Palestinians have through international law. To the point, for the fact that the donor call focuses on the poor delivery system, this implies that is accepting Israel's move to bar UNRWA, and by that account tolerates its violation of international law. It is sending a strong signal to the Jewish state that they only need to improve their distribution system and depoliticize their motive. This shift in focus, focus the attention away from holding Israel responsible to expecting it to do better implementing the plans. It's also shift the intention of forcing the Jewish state to lift the blockade and allow human assistance to be carried by organizations that are not politically motivated, and more so by UNRWA. And there lies the consequences of this call. With no real actions, the call becomes a mere objection to what Israel is doing.
The United Nations has said that over 2 million people in Gaza face a dire famine risk due to a nearly 3-month-long blockade that has severely limited the flow of humanitarian aid, although the Israeli occupying authorities seized the restriction allowing few lorries to enter the Palestinian territory. UN agencies state that the measure is far from being sufficient.
مع إذاعة الجزائر الدولية لن تفوتكم لحظة واحدة من الأخبار السياسية